If you absolutely loved unranked heavyweight bangers like I know Matt does, we have a big time fight coming up this weekend between Carlos Felipe and Jake Collier. And Matt, for Jake Collier, this guy, former RFA middleweight champ, he came in, made a lot of noise at middleweight, then up at light heavyweight, and then he took a lot of time off, like a lot of time off. Came back at heavyweight, didn't even look like the same guy, went out there and fought Tom Aspinall. And again, this was Tom Aspinall's UFC debut. It was over in Fight Island. And we had an inkling at how good Aspinall was. I mean, a guy that had trained with Tyson Fury for boxing. He was an accredited jiu-jitsu player and coach with his dad at Team Cowbon. Came into that fight, and Jake Collier just couldn't get started. Maybe it was ring rust. Maybe it was jitters. Maybe it was the fact that, again, this guy started off his career at 185, and now he's the heaviest that a heavyweight can get in the cage. What was he, 264.5 his last time out? But for Collier, didn't look good in that fight. So we get an idea of your place in the division. We'll give you Jean Vellante. And again, when the commentators start to talk about intangibles that aren't just like heart and toughness, they're just like, hey, the guy used to play football at Hofstra and he has a good time outside of the cage. You kind of know what kind of a fight you might get. Now, Jean Vellante did not look good in that fight, physically or fight-wise. And I know he did cut Collier early on the bridge of the nose, but while Vellante didn't look all that great, we should give credit where credit's due. Jake Collier looked like the guy that we had seen at middleweight in years past. He threw a lot of leg kicks. He had the athleticism, nice L-step, really good boxing combinations. Totally dominated that fight. Ended up winning on the judges' scorecards 30-27. Collier in a return to form that last time out for Carlos Felipe. And I know you disagree with a lot of people, and we'll get into it a little bit later on, but in his fight against Justin Tafa, majority of people had Tafa winning that fight. Felipe did go out there and put on an instant classic. So, on MMA decisions out of that fight, 4 scored at 29-28 for Felipe, 16 scored at 29-28 for Tafa.
So people just like you and me.
I had a 29-28 Tafa. But regardless, you go look at that fight, it was close. For Carlos Felipe, the only bit of resistance he's faced in the UFC was really the fight against Sergey Spivak, where in the first round, it was all right. And then in the second and the third, Spivak absolutely dominated it. He went out there, had a fight against Yorgan de Castro. Relatively forgettable. Wasn't one of the best fights we've ever seen. Felipe on the winning end there. But you know how good Felipe's boxing is. Jake Collier, bit of a jack of all trades, but very good stand-up. This should be a good fight if it's not.
Yeah, entertainment-wise, I do think this fight will deliver. I guess I should really start my piece like that, because for Jake Collier, I feel like we always have to bring up the fact that he was 185 pounds. For me, baseball reference, I know baseball's not as popular as it used to be, and I don't do many of these, but Dober used to have this really big beard. He's a baseball player. Now he plays for the Yankees, and they don't allow beards. Looks like a completely different person. No one has made a bigger physical change by just switching weight classes or teams than Jake Collier and Dober. Because, like you said, he moved up to heavyweight, and I'm like, wait, that's the same guy? But it is, and you're 100% spot on. You didn't really tell, or you weren't really able to tell that it was the same guy in that Aspinall fight, because honestly, I look at Tom Aspinall and I really do see a guy who's going to be around the top 10, top 5 for a very, very long time. And knowing what we know now, there's no shame in losing to a guy like Tom Aspinall. If you go out there and drop Andrei Arlovski and then choke him out, like, that's as impressively as you can beat some veteran like Arlovski. And I really do think Aspinall has that kind of a ceiling. Now, on the flip side for Felipe, and I should also get this out of the way before anything, I don't think either one of these guys are top 15 talents. I always get excited about a Carlos Felipe fight because it's kind of fun. But, like, at the end of the day, I don't really think he has the skill set that's going to go in there and really challenge a guy like a Marcin Tybura, for instance. I got to stop using his name as an example as, like, a low-level ranked heavyweight, because next thing you know, he might be in there fighting for a title. But with Carlos Felipe, I do like his cardio for heavyweight, which is weird. I do kind of like his boxing, but the thing I really dislike about Carlos Felipe, I don't think he's ever thrown a straight punch in his whole life. The looping hooks that this man throws, yeah, if they land, they're really, really good, don't get me wrong, but the fact that every single thing he does throw is in the form of a hook, a guy like Jake Collier, who, yes, you can say, oh, he might physically not look like he used to, still technically he isn't bad, and he really does put his volume together well. And I know it's really hard to go off of a Jean Vellante heavyweight performance, because listen, Maurice Green got dropped and still submitted Jean Vellante off his back. Stuff like that normally doesn't happen in MMA, but I do think Jake Collier actually looked really good in that fight.
Yeah, and I mean, when you do look at this one, in terms of the odds, Felipe opened a minus 200, went down to about a minus 265. He's now at a minus 181, so there is money just about now coming in on Collier. Open a plus 170, he's now plus 149. And if we have a look over on Tapology Map for the total votes, might be a bit of a surprise to some. 972 total votes, 87% Felipe, 46% by decision, 49% by knockout. For the 13% that have Collier, let's have fun with it. 54% by decision, 37% by knockout or TKO. And if you did look at Jake Collier's last fight against Vellante, actually happened to be a future UFC fighter in his corner, being Dakota Bush. They both train out of the pit, or the Smith pit being the gym. But yeah, I mean, I look at this one, it's tricky. Now, I have to say this. For Carlos Felipe, the guy's doing something that's worked for some fighters. Now, when fighters get out of it, they lose. It's called platinum blonde hair. We saw it at a Charles Oliveira champion. And then when his teammate Laureano Staropoli decides, hey, I was platinum blonde the last time I was out, it didn't work. Let's just go regular dark hair. Didn't work for him. For Phil Hawes, platinum blonde, oh boy, I'm beating a Dacus brother. So for Felipe, over on the IGs, he's got the platinum blonde hair, training out of Arte Suave. He's training out of Life Arts MMA, or Macias. But I look at this fight, Matt. It is tricky. Both guys, the bigger heavyweights that you're ever going to find. Height advantage for Collier. It is a tricky one to call. And for me, listen, when the odds are that far apart and I see the fight being close, it's tempting to take the underdog. So what are you thinking here?
It is tempting to take the underdog. And honestly, I was just about to make a very similar point. I don't love the odds on Felipe, but I still think at the end of the day, he is going to win this fight. Because for me, Carlos Felipe is weird. He has a good chin. But the fact that I know he has a good chin means that I know he's been cracked clean, and that does worry me. But when you're in there with a guy like Jake Collier, who is known more for his volume at the heavyweight division than his ability to really go out there and hit you with one shot, it's really hard to go out there and out-volume a guy like Carlos Felipe, especially at heavyweight. Jake Collier, with his style, he could go in there and beat a guy like Maurice Green. He could beat a lot of other unranked heavyweights, I think, and I think Jake Collier could actually go on. I'm not going to get crazy and say a run by any means, but I do think he could string together a couple decent wins at heavyweight. I just don't think he's going to get that streak started with Carlos Felipe. Like I said, Felipe, it's weird because he looks labored from the second the fight starts, very similar to like an Edson Barbosa, for instance. But for the heavyweight division, he is a guy who can keep his output at least steady throughout 3 rounds, which is sort of rare for this division. So I am going to have to stick with the Carlos Felipe pick.
When I look at Jake Collier, the thing that he does a lot better than Felipe does is throw kicks. And he throws a lot of kicks. He can throw a good high kick. Again, he can work the leg. Now, in the fight against Jean Vellante, it's a lot of 1-2 L step, 1-2 L step, getting out of the way of the danger. It's going to be tricky with those long hooks of Carlos Felipe. But in a fight like this, again, I do see the value in Jake Collier, so I'm going to go shooting for the underdog in this one. I'm going Collier.
So the only thing I'm going to add to that is it's going to be really hard for Collier to get his kicks off because of the pressure of Carlos Felipe. Because Carlos Felipe, if he's not in punching range with you, he suffocates all the space. He's not a guy who, he doesn't spend his stalling time, for lack of a better term, in open space in the cage, just standing around. When he's looking to stall in a fight, he is using that as a way to control the distance and clinch his opponent. So for that reason, I just don't think Collier is going to be able to get those kicks off, and that's why I got to stick with
But it should be a close and competitive fight, and when we're split, it's usually a close and competitive fight. So, Matt, I have Jake Collier in this one. You're going Carlos Felipe. Absolutely love unranked heavyweights that normally deliver, so make sure you check that one out. We've got a great card. 3 5-round fights up at the top. Holy smokes, you're not going to want to miss this. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. As we always say, let's get into it.